Welcome to Darasa Online. I'm Saleh Yassin with the history subject. Hope you are doing well, and today we shall continue with our topic, Africa in International Affairs, with the subtopic of African Regional Cooperation. We began this topic a little while back, and we see that we shall make a continuation from where we stopped. You remember we began the topic with the African continental cooperation. We began with continental cooperation. When I presented to you about the Organization of African Unity and its successor, the African Union, now today we would begin with the second part of the topic, and that is African Regional Cooperation. We know something about this because it is a common issue in Africa, and all regions in Africa almost have got their respective regional cooperations. Without wasting time, we shall move very fast by seeing the specific objectives of the question. What we are expected to achieve after this lesson as the set objectives. One is analyzing the objectives of different regional groupings in Africa, and two, analyzing critically the achievements and problems resulting from the establishment of regional groupings and their impact on Africa. Those are the two objectives that we have to drive our lesson on, to see that at the end of the lesson we are in position to analyze the two aspects of the objectives and achievements, as well as the problems resulting from establishment of regional cooperations in Africa. Then after that we shall have a question to reflect on how much we have grasped, we have collected from the topic. Our question states, regional economic integrations are mostly unsuccessful. Account for their failure in 6 points. It's my expectation that at the end of the lesson, all listeners, viewers shall be in position to answer that question. We begin straight away by looking at what are these regional cooperations or integrations. We can call them, we shall use different terms in describing them. We can call them cooperations, groupings, unions, as well as organizations. All these can refer to what we are going to look at. By definition, regional integrations is when a group of countries get together and develop a formal agreement about how they will conduct trade with each other. That one tells that regional cooperations are mostly about trade and economic cooperation or integration, to create a formulated economic interdependence of countries belonging to the same region. It is a process where barriers to trade are reduced or eliminated to facilitate trade between regions or nations. The most important thing is economic cooperation, and mostly this one is through trading partnership. That is the basis of economic integrations or regional integrations in Africa. The historical background of this organization is an outcome of the spirit of Pan-Africanism, which we highlighted when we were starting with the topic, when we said that the call for African unity resulted into the formation of the Organization of African Unity vis-a-vis the African Union. However, we know well that the Organization of African Unity as well as the the Pan-Africanism movement were the foundation for the formation of all African corporations. That explains that even these regional corporations are a product of Pan-Africanism. That call for to unite Africans into blocks so as later on to achieve the United States of Africa. As a gradual approach that in the end is expected to create United States of Africa. The idea we saw the other time when we are looking at the two different groups that differed from one another, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. You remember we said that the Casablanca group called for a Federation of Africa for a quick formation of the United States of Africa. However, the Monrovia group called for a gradual process through the formation of regional integrations that in the end are expected to be united and achieve the United States of Africa. Generally, the origin of regional cooperation in Africa is response to the call of uniting African countries to jointly address their political, social, and economic needs. Aside with the spirit of Pan-Africanism, but there is also the urgent need to see that African countries can economically cooperate, to see that they move forward together so that they jointly solve their social, political, economic problems. That is also another basis of regional cooperation, and it is the main objective for the formation of regional cooperation even in other parts of the world. The regional integrations are then found on the grounds of uplifting economic performance and improve the well-being of the people in the partner countries. The main regional integrations in Africa are the East African Community, the Economic Community of West African States, in short ECOWAS, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, Southern African Development Community, SADC. These are the major economic integrations in Africa. There is only one, that is IGAD, but not so much active. So we would like that we would go briefly through this and know where they belong and their member countries and a few comments on their origins. We begin with the East African Community, the community where most of my listeners, I believe, are coming from. The East African Community was first formed in 1967 as a political and economic grouping by the three East African states of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. That one tells that the East African Community was formed in two phases. The phase one, the phase one was that one of 1967, when the three East African countries of Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda came together. The president of those three countries, that is Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere for Tanzania, then Mzee Jomo Kenyatta for Kenya, and Milton Obote for Uganda, came together in 1967 to see forward on how to form a union, a political economic union that would put them jointly together to solve their social, political, economic problems. Then it came into effect in December 1967 when the East African Community and the East African Common Market were started. Unfortunately, after only 10 years, this East African Community collapsed due to a number of reasons: misunderstandings between the leaders, having related economies, the role of the imperialist countries, border conflicts, shortage of funds, similar economies. Then we also have shortage of skilled manpower and inadequate physical infrastructure. We also have the border and border misunderstandings between the East African countries. We know there was, by that time of 1977, when the community collapsed, Uganda had a president who entered into conflicts with Kenya and Tanzania over border issues. That one means that the relationship between the countries was deteriorated and the community eventually had to collapse. Then later on, the community was revived, which most people call the new or the revived or the current East African Community, when the new leaders of these three countries thought that it was important to revive that good relationship that the three East African countries had. So in 1993, the three presidents by then in Tanzania was Mzee Al Hassan Mwinyi, and Kenya there was Arap Moi, and Uganda Yoweri Kaguta Museveni came to sit in Kampala to see forward that they have to revive the community and see how it can be reborn and to unite the three East African countries. Their meeting produced fruits, and in 1999 the community was made up of the Eastern African countries. So the new East African Community is a regional union created in November 1999 and made up of the Eastern African countries. In the beginning, it was only Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. However, other countries of the region also joined, Rwanda and Burundi, and later South Sudan also joined. The headquarters of the community remain in Arusha in Tanzania, like the way they were in the previous community. The East African Community we have seen was revived when the agreement was signed by Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, building upon the old East African Cooperation Agreement, which was signed in 1963. I've already explained that when the three leaders of these countries, I would like to repeat, Mzee Al Hassan Mwinyi of Tanzania, we have, there was the late Arap Moi of Kenya, and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. It came into force in 2000, 23 years after the collapse of the previous East African Community, and its organs were created. Rwanda and Burundi, I've said, became members in 2007, and South Sudan also gained membership in 2016. The historic background of the East African Community is linked from the countries of Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania from their historical links, which began right away during the time of the colonial rule, when, for example, the East African High Commission was formed in 1948, lasting to 1961, when Tanganyika attained independence. Here I have a map for you to show you a map of Africa showing where the countries of East African Community. Here we have Tanzania, then there is Kenya and Uganda, which are the original countries of the union or the organization right away from 1967, and when it was revived in 1999. We already seen that Rwanda and Burundi joined in 2007. Then recently in 2016, South Sudan joined after seceding from Sudan or the Khartoum government. Then number two of our communities is the Economic Community of West African States. After the East African Community, the first East African Community was formed. The next main regional economic integration that was formed in Africa came to be the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. The Economic Community of the West African States is a regional political and economic organization of 15 member countries established on the 28th of May 1975. Its main goal is to promote economic integration among its members, but also it has political roles to play to ensure peace and stability in the region, the West African region that has been ravaged by so many political instabilities right away from independence. Among the 15 member countries of the ECOWAS, 8 are French speaking. We know that the large part of West Africa was colonized by the French, so you can see the number that there are 8 member states in the region. So of the 15, 8 are French speaking. That's the former French colonies. And 5 are English speaking countries and 2 Portuguese. We know the Portuguese West African former colonies of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. Then on that basis, ECOWAS has 3 official languages. That is French, because their majority are French speakers. Then English, we've seen 5 members of the community are English speakers. And then 2 or Portuguese. So those are the three languages, that is English, French, and Portuguese, depending on the member countries that belong to the community. Mauritania was the only member of the ECOWAS that was Arabic speaking. However, she withdrew in 2000, so she's no longer a member. ECOWAS member states, you can see them: Benin, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Ivory Coast, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau. There are two Guineas: Guinea, the French Guinea, then the Guinea-Bissau, which belongs to the Portuguese, Liberia, Mali, and Niger. These are the members. ECOWAS was founded on the 28th, that's one I've seen, 1975, with the signing of the Treaty of Lagos, with its stated mission to promote economic integration across the West African region, aiming to achieve collective self-sufficiency for its member states. On the map, we can see where the block belongs. That is in green. That is where the ECOWAS belong. These are the 15 member countries of the economic integration, the ECOWAS. Then we move very fast to the Southern African Development Community. That one with the 16 member states. The Southern African Development Community, SADC, is a regional grouping of Southern African countries. The SADC, with its headquarters in Gaborone, Botswana, was founded in 1992 to further socio-economic cooperation and integration, as well as political and security cooperation among its 16 members. We are here. You can note that the SADC has gone beyond normal economic cooperation by also looking at security and political matters of the region. Even the other regions also have the same, they overlap into political and security issues, as we shall note in the main objectives or aims of these communities. The member states of SADC are Angola, Botswana, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Eswatini. Eswatini is the new name for Swaziland, also known as the Switzerland of Africa, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi, Mauritius, Mozambique, Namibia, Seychelles, South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And the Comoros, that was recently admitted into the Union in 1917 at the 37th SADC Summit of Heads of States and Government in Pretoria, South Africa, then became the full member at the 38th Summit of Head of States and Governments on August 2018 in Windhoek, Namibia. This movement, this organization or the cooperation has got its origin in the 1960s and 1970s, when leaders of independent African countries and national liberation movements coordinated their struggles to bring an end to colonial and white minority rule in Southern Africa. So the immediate forerunner of SADC was the Frontline States grouping formed to help in the liberation of Southern African countries under minority rule. If you can recall that in the struggle, most of the Southern African countries attained their independence by armed struggle. We have countries like Namibia, Angola, Mozambique by direct armed struggle, but also we have Zimbabwe and the Republic of South Africa that were under white minority regimes. So in the struggle for independence, member states joined hands in the struggle, but also there were some neighboring countries that came forward to assist their neighbors fight for their independence. Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi formed the frontline states, the original members of the frontline states, to join hand in the fight against the white minority regimes and the colonial rule in the region. This union brought these countries together, the union of the frontline states is one that produced what we have now as SADC. So it was easy to to come together after independence to form a bloc for interdependence and economic political cooperation. The formation of the Frontline States grouping united the leaders of independent African rule countries to form the Southern African Development Coordination Conference. That conference that was a result of the adoption by 9 majority-ruled South African countries of the Lusaka Declaration on the 1st April 1980, paved the way for the establishment of SADC. We have seen that their major unity was developed during the struggle for independence and achieving majority rule in the region. They came together that after independence, that cooperation should move forward to look at a creation of a new future for the African peoples in those countries. Here we have the map of those countries. You can see the badge or the emblem of the Union, and these are the 16 member countries, including Madagascar and the Comoros. You can see Tanzania there. You can see the DRC, Angola, Namibia, South Africa. We have Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, then Lesotho and Swaziland. The Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA. The COMESA is a free trade area that founded in December 1949 to replace the preferential trade area that came into an end in 1981. So COMESA came to replace the PTA. With headquarters in Lusaka, Zambia, COMESA has now 21 member states stretching from Tunisia to Eswatini. You have said Swaziland. The COMESA is the largest regional economic organization in Africa. The main focus of this community has been on the formation of a large economic and trading unit to overcome trade barriers faced by the individual states. The 21 members of the states of the community are Burundi, Comoros, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Libya, Madagascar, Malawi, Mauritius, Rwanda, Seychelles, Somalia, Swaziland, Sudan, Tunisia, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The COMESA was established when a treaty was signed on November 5, 1993 in Kampala, Uganda, and then ratified in the following year in Lilongwe, Malawi on December 8, 1994. Here on the map is where you can see the member countries of COMESA. You can see many members. It is one of the most complex regional groupings in Africa with so many members and covering a large part of the continent. The aims and objectives of economic cooperation. I have seen it imperative that you can see the common aims of these regional economic integration other than dealing with them on individual terms, dealing with them separately depending or in reference to the individual cooperations. To develop programs aimed at expanding cooperation among the member states in such as politics, economic, social, and defense fields for the benefit of the partner states. To establish a custom unions, this involves duty-free trade between the partner states, establishment of a common market to enhance trade in the region, establishment of a monetary union, that is to develop a common currency for their regions. That one will help in the promotion of trade in their regions. To promote peace, security, and stability within their regions. Economic development cannot be achieved without peace and stability. To promote sustainable and balanced growth and development among partner states. To achieve development and economic growth, alleviate poverty, enhance the living standards for the people of partner states. Then promote self-sustaining development on the basis of collective self-reliance and the interdependence of member states. And also to achieve sustainable utilization of natural resources and effective protection of the environment. and then strengthen and consolidate the long-standing historical, social, and cultural links among the people of their respective regions. Major achievements of these economic integrations. What have they achieved in their operation since when they were formed? This one shows how much they have been able to fulfill their objectives. One, in transport infrastructure improvement. They work to improve trade, to develop interdependence, to develop cooperation. The development of efficient transport system is a necessary must. The different regions have tried to develop transport and infrastructure communication lines to improve mobility of goods and services in their region. In the ECOWAS, that Economic Community of West African States, made road construction between cities in its region. To give a few examples, there is Lagos-Abidjan highway. There is Nouakchott-Lagos highways, and the road network Elubo to El Flao, then to Lagos, are one of the achievements which have been attained. Improvement of relations between member states. The communities have established relations between member states in a number of ways. This one has improved relations between these countries to work together and jointly try to put efforts together to solve their socio-economic problems. The ECOWAS, for example, has united the French, English, and Portuguese former colonies into a union, one cooperation. This one is an improvement indeed, and also other regions. SADC has also united those countries there, and the East African Community and COMESA alike. Strengthen unity. The region economic cooperations have integrated member states for cooperation. Countries can now carry out joint projects because they are united. They can pull together their resources to carry out joint ventures to help themselves develop their economies. Such as in the ECOWAS, there is food and transport cooperation between Nigeria and Niger since after 1975. Such ventures to help each other out, and maybe it will be difficult for one to have it on its own or alone. Then in East Africa, there is the construction of the oil pipeline by Uganda and Tanzania, stretching from Hoima in Uganda to Tanga in Tanzania. The two governments are jointly working on this to see that the oil pipeline from the Uganda oil fields in Hoima is constructed to Tanga, to the port of Tanga in Tanzania. The regional economic integrations facilitate free movement of goods and services with no strict borders regulations for the people of the member states and trades. The communities have enabled people in their member states to easily move within their respective regions. You can give examples. Specific examples can be given on the ECOWAS and the East African passports. The ECOWAS have got the ECOWAS passport, as well as the East African community has its own passport, where there is a joint passport for the member states. This has allowed free movement of people, goods, and services. There is free mobility, whereby now people can move within the region with little regulations. This has allowed labor mobility, but also has helped in the improvement of trade in respective regions. Then elimination of trade barriers. With the removal of trade barriers, people, goods, and services travel around the countries with ease. The removal of trade barriers helped consolidate the implementation of the common market and allows free movement of persons, goods, and services, including labor mobility. With the elimination of trade barriers, that one means that common market stands. This will allow common custom unions, common tariffs for the member states to facilitate trade, to facilitate movement, to facilitate easy improvement of interdependence within the region, and also help in achieving sustainable development among the member countries. Then another one is maintenance of peace and security in their regions. This one is very common, and we have examples, especially in West Africa, where we know very well from the history of Africa that the West African region has been a home of political instabilities. The ECOWAS has indeed come forward to help reduce or eliminate these political instabilities. It's true that from its foundation towards the 1990s, the organization seemed to have failed in maintaining peace in the region. But of recent, they have come forward with more vitality to see that the region is in peace and there is change indeed seen. The ECOWAS nations signed a protocol of mutual defense assistance in Freetown, Sierra Leone, that provided for the establishment of the Allied Armed Force of the community, the ECOMOG. The ECOMOG. The ECOMOG, that one as a military force of the ECOWAS. ECOMOG has helped in the suppression has helped in the restoration of peace in the region. We know of the civil wars that happened in the country, in the region. For example, this year is included in Ivory Coast in 2003. We have then Guinea, Bissau 2012, Mali 2013, and Gambia in 2017. You know, when Yahya Jammeh had refused to leave power, and ECOMOG intervened into Gambia to set him off. Also know the post-election violence and the proceeding civil war that happened in in Ivory Coast, when Laurent Gbagbo refused to surrender power to Alassane Ouattara. The ECOMOG intervened to restore peace in the country, and the civil war came to an end. The East African community, where we have seen that the community has helped in restoration of peace in a number of its in its partner states. We saw that recently when there was an attempted coup against President Nkurunziza of Burundi, the community intervened to restore him to power to ensure that the country's peace is maintained. We know also 2007 elections in Kenya resulted in two post-election violence that left many, if not thousands, dead in Kenya. The community intervened, and we know the region's international diplomats like Benjamin William Mkapa, and by then the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Dr. Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, intervened to restore peace. When they went there as region members and also as international diplomats, along others like the former UN Secretary Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, an agreement was signed and peace was restored in the country. In the agreement which was signed, Kibaki remained as president and the post of prime minister was created, and it was to be occupied by Raila Odinga, the two opposing parties that were fighting each other. As Raila, the ODM, with his ODM party, refused to acknowledge the results of the election that declared Mwai Kibaki a winner of the elections of that year. Then in the SADC, there's a good example that in the 2008 elections that resulted in two political chaos in Zimbabwe, the then SADC and South African President Thabo Mbeki intervened by moving very fast to Zimbabwe to create a settlement between the MDC, the Movement for the Democratic Change of Morgan Tsvangirai, and ZANU-PF of the late Robert Mugabe. Even Tsvangirai is also passed on. Then provides forum for member states. All representatives of the integration annually gather at their community summits or the councils of ministers to discuss on important matters concerning their regions. These meetings all provide a platform for member states to discuss, to air out their issues, raise solutions to the problems, and see a way forward on how to achieve their goals, specifically improve relations among themselves, and also to see forward on improving their economies and improving the life standards of their people. The community set up special funds for development. The member states contribute annually. They have annual or arranged contributions for important or specific issues, including defense, including development of infrastructures in the region to propel trade. So they contribute funds, and these funds, they can be reasoned by themselves or even seek for loans from financial institutions, either the World Bank, IMF, or even African Development Bank. As a region, it becomes easier for them to seek loans from the African Development Bank. Help in the efforts to enhance environmental protection, capacity building, as well as sustainable resource management for the development in the member states. Along with that, helps in joint fight for disease. These movement, the corporations have this, and they really are achieving well. Like ECOWAS established a regional center for disease control, and the region was very active in trying to see out that countries that were hardly hit by Ebola receive assistance. Then we can now turn to the problems that these regional economic groupings are facing. All these we are looking is a generalization of issues cutting across the African continent, or the issues that are cutting across the different regions. We have seen the East African Community, we have seen ECOWAS, we have seen COMESA and SADC. There are common problems that these common issues that cut across the different regional corporations in Africa. These communities are passing through a lot of problems that indeed are failing them to achieve their goal to the maximum. Let us look, we begin with the problems that they are facing. One and somehow paramount is the political instabilities in the forms of civil wars, border conflicts, and coup d'etats and post-election violence. We have a number of examples in this, and these examples, we can just put them on the board as we interpreted them before. Most commonly is the West African region, and we know that it has gone through a number of political instabilities right away from independence, like Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast had a civil war in 2003. That one is a good example that we can have. Then we have Guinea, Bissau in 2012, and many others. We have Gambia, 2017. We have Mali, 2013. The ECOWAS intervene in solving these problems, but we see that it is a problem that these countries suffered, and somehow making them lag behind it economically, or also contributed to the deterioration of the performance of these. So next, we can look at similar economies. These regions, the economic communities, because members belong the same regions, they have found themselves producing similar products or items. and mostly they are agro-based. Their economies are agro-based. So they find themselves producing similar food crops and similar cash crops. This one makes it difficult to make exchange between themselves and really fails trade. And so the problem comes there that trade cannot be promoted easily because the members produce similar products. Trade involves exchange. You exchange for what you want with what you have. But if you have what the neighbor has, then exchange becomes quite difficult. Then 3, they have poor infrastructure development. Member countries have failed to develop efficient transport systems that would help in easing movement and propelling or development of trade in the region. That also would help in the effective utilization of resources in their respective regions, especially in cases where the neighboring or countries were colonized by different colonial masters. It is difficult, and there is poor interstate transport and communication lines. This one's really is a sabotage to the development of, is a limitation to the development of trade and cooperation among these the member states. Then another one is multiple membership. We know African countries are members of so many regional and international cooperation, but also the continental cooperation of the African Union. The problem comes that most of these corporations have got similar objectives and similar aims. Most of the communities that different African countries have joined have got similar aims and objectives. This one has created a problem of divided loyalty. You remember the saying that you cannot serve two masters at a go effectively. So belonging to so many different groupings with similar objectives and aims has created the problem that the African countries find it difficult to see how they can satisfy all the groupings. Remember also, they need to make contributions for those different groupings. I shall give a few examples. We have countries like Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi. These ones belong to the East African community, but also they belong to COMESA. We have another example in Tanzania, belongs to the East African community, belongs to SADC. She used to be a member of COMESA but withdrew because of the complexities of COMESA. Then such are good examples that you can see there. It becomes quite difficult. As if this is not enough as to make it difficult for the cooperation to work, they are members of international corporations as well. Former British colonies are members of the Commonwealth of Nations, while the former French colonies are members of the French community. Then all together, they are members of the African Union and the members of United Nations. It is difficult to satisfy the demands of all these. It is burdensome. It is burdensome. It is burdensome. Rwanda. So African countries are in just confusion, which one to serve and which one to leave. Another one, we have the problem of different levels of development. Different levels of some countries in their respective economic communities have moved quite further in terms of development than others. This one creates unbalanced relationship. The most developed countries face a two-phase way of how they benefit or affected by by being so much developed compared to their neighbors. For example, in the West African community, in the ECOWAS, Nigeria is the most developed countries and now faces problems like more migrations from the member countries into Nigeria. There's as well in South Africa. Most countries of the SADC, their members, their citizens move to South Africa. It is quite difficult. Another problem maybe can talk about language problem. African countries have got diverse ethnic groups or tribes, so they speak many languages, but also you remember that they belong to different colonial masters, and so they adopted the adoption of the language of their colonial masters also create a diverse languages and communication problem. Another issue is corruption. Especially at borders. At the borders. This is another big problem that affects trade. Sometimes border officials in some regional corporations are fond of taking bribes from traders or people moving across the border. This one affects relationship between countries and limits trade development. Then another one is conflicts. Conflicts. Some countries belong to the same communities, but they are not in good terms. They are in wrangles and conflicts that sometimes also can bridge into border or interstate conflicts. For example, the conflicts between Cameroon and Nigeria over border issues. They have been in wrangles until the issue was solved by the international community. Then so many countries in such wrangles. And then another one is foreign interference. Foreign interference is another issue. Imperialist countries intervene into the affairs of African countries or regional groupings to sabotage their development, because they know, they are in fear that if these regions help Africans attain self-sustaining and integrated economy and develop capacity building, dependence on them will automatically reduce or else will end. They intervene into the regional affairs by creating bilateral relations. bilateral agreements with African countries, and this one has a problem to the development of cooperation within these regional groupings. We can give, sometimes they even overthrow regimes that are not, that does not move well with them. There's an example when the French sponsored a coup that overthrew Thomas Sankara in West Africa, in Burkina Faso, because he was not their puppet. There are other problems, the issue of nationalism. There is the issue of member states put a lot of efforts in developing their individual economic sectors other than directing efforts for regional development. They are more concerned about solving their domestic problems than working as a group. A lot of their resources and attention has been put on building industries, building their agricultural potential and other sectors of production than minding about the businesses of the regions. Sometimes because of this, they are either slow or do not contribute towards the development of the regions. This one has rendered the regions a disservice. Another one is currency absence of common currencies. Absence of common currencies is another problem. There is no regional economic groupings in Africa that has a uniform currency. That one is lacking, and that one is another problem that limits trade and development of integrated economies in these African countries or regional corporations. If they want to achieve success, they can copy the example of the European Union by creating a uniform currency for their respective regions. This one will help improvement of trade, but also transfer or mobility of people from one region to another, and will solve the problem of forex or foreign exchange. That also adds another problem to international trade as countries' currencies differ in value. Then another one is low technology. This is another problem that has contributed to the slow development of regional corporations in Africa. With the low technology, most of African countries first depend on importing technology from abroad that is expensive to them. And secondly, it has contributed to the slow development of their sectors of production and low productivity as a result. With this, cannot diversify their economies. They have remained agriculture based, producing similar items of trade and food crops, and this one we have already seen limits trade. They have only small scale industries, similar small scale industries that cannot help in the development of the region. Then another one is insufficient funds. African countries are mostly poor, lacking essential physical and monetary capital to develop their economic sectors as well as to sustain economic groupings. This has really rendered this movement a disservice. And lastly, we can look at it is terrorism. Terrorism. It is a menace to the development of Africa and their cooperations. We have those examples of those like the Boko Haram, Nigeria. This has destabilized the West African region. Trade and other things cannot prosper. Neither interstate cooperation. All these is another problem. Then we have the Al-Shabaab, which is also a problem in Eastern Africa. The neighboring countries of Somalia, where the basis of Al-Shabaab is, suffer a lot. Kenya is always hit, but also Tanzania was once hit, and Uganda. So these are some of the problems that we can look at today, and maybe we can make more preparation for another. We finalize our lesson by looking at a reflection on the question which I gave in the beginning, and that is, regional economic integrations are mostly unsuccessful. Account for their failure in 6 points. What does this question need? The question needs simple and straightforward, means the problems that are affecting the performance of these regional cooperation. Why are they not succeeding? There are some problems that they are encountering, and these are political instabilities, impact of imperialism or foreign interference, production of similar products, multi-membership in two different communities, lack of common currencies that hinders trade, low infrastructure development, issues of nationalism against internationalism, low science and technology, and such shortage of fund. Well, we just looked at those problems and we come to an end of the lesson. Hope you have understood well the lesson, and we have followed me from the start to the end. And it is my desire that you acquire the knowledge that can be helpful to you to have an understanding of what pertains and what involves Africa today. And you can be very important agents of the development and seeing a way forward for a new Africa. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. Thank you very much.